see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
So anyway, I'll just start here with, hi, it's Edwin Rutch, and this is Dialogues on How to Build a Culture of Empathy, and we're doing a panel discussion here. And it's panel number 11, and it's Nurturing Empathy in the Home, Attachment, and Reflective Capacity. And I'll turn it over to Elle McSherry, and take it away, Elle.
Well, Edwin, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you and to anyone who might be viewing this. I'm sitting here with my colleagues, Kim Buellman on my left and Sarah Schumacher on my right. And we all worked together here in Seattle at the University of Washington in a program that was really meant to cultivate a secure bond between parents and young children. So we typically would work with children ages 0 to 5, and we would go into the home and work really closely with parents and caregivers and their babies. And I'm using the past tense because we no longer are working at the university, and we've all gone on and moved on into different places in our lives. But when I learned of the work you're doing and interviewing folks, I let you know that, oh, you might really want to speak with my colleagues, really is who I thought of because of the work we had done and how it's so profoundly, I don't think I'm off when I say this, but it profoundly impacted our lives. So, so yeah, is there anything, any place in particular you'd like us to start in talking about our work or empathy in general, or do you have questions for us, Edwin?
Yeah, I think this is a great topic because the more and more I look into it, I see that that really empathy in the home is such an important topic. It's an important area because it's really, you know, it's like the home is like the basic social building block, and to nurture empathy in that environment, I think, is so critical. And it seems like the work that you were doing is really geared around that. Is how do you create a home environment that nurtures empathy? Does that seem, or how does that kind of resonate with?
Yeah, and well, yes, absolutely. And I think, you know, one thing that we could do is open up the discussion here among ourselves, maybe, and maybe it'd be of interest for you and for the people listening or watching to learn what it was actually that we would do when we'd visit a home. So would one of you be willing to describe that?
Well, we could start. There were elements. It was a home visiting program. So I think what was unique about our program is that we went into the home. We went into the home to visit with the parents and the children, and that sets up sort of this nice foundation for building trust with the parent and with kind of building that relationship so we could start the kind of work that we were going to do with them. So that was something I think very unique. And there are many other home visiting programs, but this one was unique because we would go in each week. So building a connection and relationship with the parent from week to week is how we started kind of building our communication and bringing in the tools that we would use and our way of being with the parents from the very beginning. So that's something I think that was very critical to the program, is that it was in the home and it started with us building a relationship with the parent. And then the elements that we use, maybe you could talk a little bit about what were the tools or our... Yeah.
So I think what Sarah is trying to say is that the first thing you would do with a parent is just join with him or her about what their life is like, what their child is like, what it's like for them to raise this child. And then after we felt that the parent was comfortable with us, we would actually videotape her playing with her child. And that we would try to, you know, be a fly on the wall just to see what it's like to watch this dyad. And then after we would videotape, we would have the parent watch the videotape with us and just ask her questions about how she was feeling, how did she think her child was feeling, what was that like for her when that happened, if there was some conflict, what was it like if she was teaching the child something or the child couldn't do something. So we would ask those reflective questions to help her start thinking about what it's like for her and her child, and hopefully she would be empathetic with the child because we also would be empathetic to her situation or how she was feeling. We'd also give some verbal feedback, some positive feedback or instructive feedback about what she was doing that was really good for child development and their relationship. So that was the crux of our intervention, so that she could feel like we were on her side, that she was being a good parent, that she could do some more of what she was already doing to help promote their relationship. And I think we had really good outcomes just doing that for 8 weeks, 6 weeks, just coming into the home and videotaping and watching the videotape and making the mother feel empowered that she could be a good parent and that we understood the challenges of parenting.
Yeah, so there's a really critical piece here in the work, and that we genuinely were interested in the parent's knowledge about their child. Because the parent, the assumption we're walking in with is, hey, you are with your child 24/7, you know them best. And while we might come in with some expertise in the world of development that we could contribute to the conversation, we were also really there to help the parent recognize where his or her own knowledge about the child was valid and very useful in building a relationship with that child. So our work was really to, like Sarah was saying, the critical piece there is our work to build a relationship with the parent, to empower them to build a beautiful relationship with their child too.
So it's really like you're modeling empathy. So you're going with the parents, they're getting you're modeling it, you're listening to them, you're reflecting what you're hearing, and then they feel heard, they feel seen, they feel understood, and that can kind of pass on as well to the child. The parent has kind of like their empathy battery is kind of like charged, and then they have more to kind of give as well.
Yeah.
So,
yes, and in fact, that was one of the theories that we were working on.
Yeah, and you're talking about, you talked about attachment, that it seems to come out of like attachment theory, that your work, is that right? I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about what that is and how that works and kind of the background to that.
Sure. Yes, I mean, their attachment theory is informing this work, and I think that Bowlby's work, John Bowlby, was really the person I think that first started to talk about attachment between parents and children and the importance of that for a child's healthy development. And there are many, many other experts in the field. Kim could probably list some of those. So definitely informed by the theory that in order for a child to really grow and develop cognitively and physically and emotionally, they need at least one person in their life that they feel they have this secure, what they call a secure relationship with. So that would be someone that would recognize them, see them, and work to understand what it's like to be in their world. So, and by the way, that was kind of that's our definition of empathy. I would say is that empathy is not a feeling, and this was something that I learned in doing the work in my own studies. That was really wonderful. As I studied empathy and looked into what it was and how it operates, I learned, oh, it's more than just feeling someone else's feelings or tuning into that. It's really trying to step into their world and understand the world from their point of view. And it's that critical piece that seems to be correlated when they do research and studies, that ability to step into another person's world, to be reflective about what's happening in another person, for another person, that's correlated with more secure outcomes for children. So if they have that experience with at least one person, outcomes for children look better on a lot of different levels. But is there anything else that you all want to add to that?
Well, I think when we're talking about attachment too, what we're really also looking at is that the attachment relationship, the relationship between a parent or this important person to the child, is the foundation for all other relationships in this child's life. It's kind of this model for how this child grows into the world. And so that relationship is very important when we're talking about empathy, because building that capacity in a young child in that relationship, they will grow to take that on. And so that's what we're looking at when we look at empathy, starting from the home and then kind of expanding out into the world, into the community. And it really starts with that relationship, or that's what attachment theory would say about that. And that's what I believe and witnessed. So, yeah.
And part of what we're really doing also when we're doing this work with the mothers is helping them understand the social emotional needs of children. So a crucial element would not be not only asking, what do you think you're feeling, what do you think the child's feeling, but what do you think the child is needing? So that's another step into the child's world. And if a mother can identify that, sometimes with our help, sometimes not, then we can just, the next question is very simple. How can we meet the child? How can you meet that need? And that really gets the mom entering the world of the child in a different way and meeting those needs so that the secure attachment can happen.
Well, we are having a little bit of freezing of the video here, so if anyone that's watching just have a little technical problem, but I think we'll just keep moving along, because I think this is such an interesting topic. And so as I'm understanding it, is with the attachment theory, it's that having the sense that someone is in your world and feeling who you are kind of gives you a sense of grounding. and that if you have that, and that sense that you're in, someone's in your world, that you want to, as you grow up and you want to create that environment for others. So you kind of promote that, is not promote it, but it becomes a way of life. And is that kind of, am I understanding that right?
Yes, I mean, the attachment studies have been going on for a long time. After Bowlby came up with the theory, they decided that they would look at that, how a child responds to his mother after his attachment, what I want to say, his internal attachment would be triggered. And so he would be scared or anxious or something. They actually did a whole study where a stranger would be in the room, the mom would leave, and they thought how the kid would act with that stranger would actually be their attachment style, but that wasn't right. It was when the mom came back into the room, and how the child responded to the mother is what made them insecurely attached or securely attached. So the mom would come back, and if she's a good attachment figure, then what the kid does is run to the mommy for comfort. And the mom comforts them, and it's okay. When there's an insecure attachment, the child will not look to his mother for that security, or the mom will enter the room and try to comfort, and the child won't want that comfort, or kind of come towards her and then back away from her. And so those are the insecure kids. And so what we really want is to make the insecure kids more secure. And the only way really to do that is to have an attachment figure that can meet their needs. So we're helping the mother meet the child's needs. Then the child feels like, oh, okay, I'm okay. My needs can be met, and I can meet my own needs. And as I get older, I can meet other people's needs too. Around empathy, security, compassion.
Well, what I'm looking at is how do we build a culture of empathy, and this seems like one of the building blocks for that. And I know for myself that, you know, I've been to like workshops. I just one instance where this kind of stood out for me is I went to this workshop where there was a lot of empathy. I really felt seen and felt and I found that it's almost like an internal empathy battery that I became more centered, more grounded, And then the next day I went to this dance that I do. It's like this freestyle dance. And I found I was so much more grounded and able to be present and to interact with people with less anxiety, and and then I actually in the dance said, well, I'm going to really try to mirror other people and reflect who they are. So I kind of physically kind of reflected who they were, and it kind of led to this really, interesting deep dances and real deep connections with other people. And so I really attributed that to my empathy battery having been filled the previous day. And, you kind of go out in the world and it's kind of like a selfish, everybody's in it for themselves kind of a feeling sometimes. And I find that kind of drains the empathy battery. It's like I get more and more, tense, and my grounding kind of goes down, and then, but to have the empathy battery kind of filled, to be seen and felt, I feel more grounded and able to connect more deeply with others. So
Yeah, yeah, that's a wonderful example of how that works, and it's very interesting to hear you talk about the embodiment of that you went dancing and you could see how it even showed up in your dancing and how you interacted with people. So it's a very physical experience. We're talking about helping children and parents get their emotional needs met, but it's fascinating to see that when emotional needs are met, that impacts our physiology. So one of the really amazing things that's arising out of this, the work of Bowlby and others who worked in the behavioral sciences, is that now neuroscientists are studying what's going on in the brain during certain emotional experiences in affective neuroscience. And so you have people looking at the relationship now between mothers and infants and what's happening there in brain development. And one of the most profound findings is that, or confirmations of what we've intuitively known, is that we are organized around our emotional experience. Our development is organized around our emotional experiences. So that includes everything. That includes our physiological development. That includes our cognitive development, right? So it's a very, you cannot separate these things out. They're all intertwined. So there's a whole discipline of psychoneurophysiology looking at that interconnection between our emotional health, what our internal experience does in terms of creating physical health and creating a sense of empowerment in the world, creating the ability to connect, be grounded and connect with others from a good place. So that's a beautiful example, I think, of your own experience there. And you can imagine if you think of a little 2-year-old, right, who's just like totally out of control and having a big emotional meltdown for whatever reason, as 2-year-olds do, that's kind of what they're supposed to be doing, because they're learning how to work with all of that, and the emotional part of their brain is very active. And if they have someone there to meet them in that experience and not and to hold them in that experience in the light of empathy, and to tune into what might be happening in their little world, that seems very significant for them, so much so that they're having a meltdown. If that person can tune in and then help make it okay again for that child, imagine how that feels to a 2-year-old, to feel held in that sense emotionally, and how grounding that will be for their physiology, and how calming that will be. So a parent, this has really big impact for children when their emotional needs can be met like that, and their parent or caregiver or whoever's taking care of them can help them return to a place of stability after they have their emotional outbursts, which they will tend to do. It's very empowering for them, and they learn, as Sarah, I think you mentioned earlier, they'll start to internalize that experience of having that empathetic response from a caregiver. They'll internalize it and therefore be able to pass that along.
Well, what are your ideas for building a culture of empathy? You can do kind of programs like, I see there's a lot of programs like this, but they don't fit into a larger cultural framework for social change. I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking at, is feeling that we really need to consciously raise the value of empathy within society. You know, so that, and there's a whole lot of different ways of doing that. So one, I guess, do you think we need a culture of empathy? And if we do, you know, what do we do to kind of create that culture?
That's a big question.
Well, yeah, it's a big question, but it's one we ask ourselves, actually. So I'm thinking of our work with the groups that we started to work with. Kim, would you want to take that one?
After we did this work for many years, we came together again and decided that what we really need to happen was a group of experience. So usually we worked with the mothers one-on-one, and we got them to this place where they were able to understand their child better, empathize with him or her better. And then we realized like they still needed to empathize with themselves more, to feel more self-compassion for themselves and to empower themselves to feel like they can make a difference in their family and in the world. So we started a group called Hestia, and we had the mothers come together in a group setting without their children. We had childcare for the children. And what happened was they got to figure out what was their passion, how did they want to change their lives, and how to be more empowered and to feel it in their bodies, and to have clear guiding intentions and commitments on how to be more present and more empathetic in their family and to themselves. And so that was another program we did. And part of that program was once the mothers could embody it, could feel compassion for themselves, feel empowerment, then how are they going to take that out into the world to make more changes like they experienced? Do you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, and also in the work we were doing at the university, the theory that we were working with, or one of them, was the theory of parallel process. And we would often illustrate this by showing concentric circles. And we put the child at the very center of these concentric circles. And around the child, there'd be the parent or caregiver. Around that parent or caregiver would maybe be one of us working with them. Around us in that circle would be another circle, maybe our team. Around that team would be the program and the people participating in the program. And then around that one is the community that program's embedded in, and on and on and on. So you can see that we were thinking on that level of, oh, when we go work one-on-one with someone, we're not just thinking of that's where it ends. It's like a ripple, and the thought there was that we knew there would be a ripple effect. And then when we started to work more in the group setting, we kind of went to another layer of those concentric circles and decided, well, let's work at that layer with the group. Also, as trainers, we would go in and train people in agencies, and often there would be a ripple effect in an agency. When we would just go and work with one or two people in an agency and help them learn how to do this work, they would shift how they were working, and that would impact their relationships in the agency, so that we would see cultural change sometimes in that way, in an agency setting. So I don't know if you have more to add to that, Sarah, but that's how I think about all of that.
Yeah, I didn't know if Sarah was going to answer that.
Yeah. No, what's coming to mind too is when we think of that sort of, that image of all these circles of this building bigger and bigger, and what is so important about the home, building empathy in a home is we're starting with families and when their children are very, very young. And we know as a society that the problems we have out there, if we intervene or we bring our empathy from the very beginning with a small child and a mother, that we can prevent having to kind of look at, okay, now we have this culture that's this way or that way, and we don't, our empathy battery is really low right now in society. And we've got to go to all adults and try and figure this out. And so I think that we're really starting in the home is the place, because that's where the baby comes into the world, this infant and then a toddler. And if we start with that unit, it does have this effect over time as the next generation comes and so. And then the battery just slowly, and it is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. We know that about any cultural shifts. So it's amazing in our work, even just 8 weeks with a family, or we in the parenting circle that we worked with, that was how many weeks again? 6 weeks. In 6 weeks to see that change, and then we anticipate they bring that into their home. And then weeks after that, the dynamic between themselves and their family members maybe starts to shift. And so it actually doesn't take very long if we're intentional about how we're building that and how we are impacting families and parents in that way.
Yeah, that makes me think.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that what Sarah was saying makes me think about how one of the big emphasis in our work is not so much what we do with parents or caregivers, but how we are with them. So it's always been really important and a really big topic of our reflection and our own work to think about that, to be aware of what's the feeling we're going into a home with in ourselves, because we wanted to hold the awareness that how we showed up, bless you, matters. It matters. Our internal state as helpers or people walking into a home, that really matters. Because just like your experience illustrated, Edwin, how that emotional connection you got from being at that conference shifted how you were able to relate to other people and probably how they experienced you, because your internal state was different. So I just wanted to emphasize that Sarah has mentioned that a couple of times, that it's the way we were, the way we showed up, the way we wanted to be with parents that was equally, if not more important to what we did with them. It's who we are, how we showed up.
Yeah, so it's like go ahead. Sorry.
I think once people experience empathy, they can be empathetic towards others. That's the only way you learn empathy, if you have experienced it from another person. So I think that's why the mothers could be there with their children more, is because we were being empathetic towards them and being with them in a way they might not have been with a professional before, to really join with them in their experience and enter their world.
Yeah, sometimes what I see is that not everybody, I'm just kind of generalizing here, but people feel stressed and they don't have the capacity to empathize. It's like everybody's wanting empathy. So it's this whole chain reaction of people wanting to be heard. And then the less they're heard, kind of the worse things get and the worse things get. And it's like somewhere you've got to have a starting point. It's like to create the cycle of empathy. And it sounds like that's really what you were doing, was you're going in there, you're modeling empathy, and you're starting to create this kind of a positive empathy cycle where somebody's, being heard. And I think that's so wonderful.
Yeah. Well, and that makes me think that another interesting and vital point to describe the work we would do is that another key part of it is that we would provide that space for each other to be what we call reflective, to reflect on our experiences with families, to have a colleague sit there with us and listen to our experience, to listen to our thoughts and feelings about an experience in order that we could go back and continue to be a really good resource for our family. So that was another important work with the one-on-one work, but also the work we did in the groups, is that we together provided empathy for each other and support for each other. And that ability to reflect like that with someone and to step into their world is, again, that's the core piece of the practice of empathy. So we would practice with each other as much as we could.
Yeah, so that's like starting that chain reaction. You're empathizing with each other, so you're being heard. You're empathizing with the family, they're feeling heard, and they're kind of learning how to empathize with the children. The children are filling their empathy battery in a sense, and then they're probably creating ripple effects, and they're so it's just starting to create the kind of that virtuous empathy cycle. Then kind of this building, and it's got to start somewhere. And were you actually
Yeah.
consciously using the vocabulary of empathy, saying we're here to promote the value of empathy, and we hope that you kind of pass it on, and here's the ways of doing it.
We would do that with the people we were training. So we trained other social workers, therapists, nurses, parent educators, and home visitors about how to be with the mother. And that's where we were very explicit in terms of joining and being empathetic to the mother is the major shift that you're going to do in your work so that she can feel acknowledged, heard, experience empathy, and then pass it on to her child.
Yeah, Edwin, it was really important to give families that we were working with and the people we trained a felt experience of empathy. That more than anything else that we would tell them in terms of information. I mean, we can tell people information until you're blue in the face, but until people have an experience, it's more likely that the experience, that felt experience that is salient, that is relevant to their situation, that they feel in their, they can feel a shift in their physiology when they have an experience of empathy. And that makes an imprint and begins to generate energy or momentum. So
Yeah,
that was more than emphasis.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a lag between our audio, and so that's why I'm kind of cutting in by accident. Let's see. So I guess the thing that what I'm looking at is I kind of feel that there needs to be both the experience and the vocabulary of it. And I've heard that in terms of, just in terms of even being able to express yourself, that as you express yourself and you create a vocabulary to express the feelings that you have. I mean, if you're experiencing empathy and you just intuitively know it, and you can build your whole life around it because as a child or whatever, you kind of got that empathy from others. But it adds another layer to be able to have the vocabulary to express what it is that you're experiencing. And so I guess for me, that's why I kind of look at, there's a lot of these programs that kind of foster empathy, but they don't actually use the vocabulary and say, this is, what empathy is, this is how empathy works, this is the experience of empathy. So it's kind of combining that mirrored experience, the emotional experience with kind of that perspective taking and cognitive aspect. And I guess this kind of gets into the definition of empathy, because I see kind of like 4 parts of empathy. There's kind of like the self-empathy, connecting to your own feelings and sensations, so the kind of somatic experience. And as we get kind of like grounded, we're kind of open to kind of reflecting others. If I'm all stressed and, not connected to myself, I have difficulty connecting to others through kind of mirror neurons and through that mirrored kind of empathy. And then the third part of empathy is kind of, academics call it perspective taking, but I like to call it imaginative empathy, that we can kind of imagine ourselves in other people's situations. And then the fourth part is empathic action, that we want to kind of take action that nurtures and fosters other people's well-being. And we're kind of like biologically wired that if we connect with each other, that we just want to naturally contribute to the well-being of others because we kind of see our common humanity. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of seeing a need for kind of an integrated approach to empathy And I'm almost like thinking of kind of like an evangelical empathy. You know, it's like we got to get out there and kind of like, you know, promote it, you know, cognitively, but as well as, you know, especially viscerally and felt. So I don't know. So I'm just curious what you think about all that.
Right. Well, when I hear you speak of sort of these different layers or elements of empathy, I'm reminded that one of the things that we used a lot was video. We would tape a parent and her child interacting, and then what that really essentially would do is we'd bring that video back and we'd sit with the parent and we'd kind of slow time down a little bit. And we'd create some stillness around watching this video together, because you can stop and play, right? And as the parent would watch herself, I think all these different layers would start to unfold. So we had some vocabulary around it. Oh, what are you feeling right there? And then the parent would look at herself or himself and think, oh, I was feeling this way. And then they'd shift over and they'd look at their child interacting face to face with them in play or whatever the situation was. And I think it started to kind of unfold this, all these different layers that you're talking about. So I think using video kind of opened up talk about empathy, the use of language. If a parent had difficulty labeling their own feelings, we would help them by asking them questions and kind of getting them back into themselves a little bit and into that moment, because we taped it. And there's a lot more to say about that. I don't know if there's anything that you want to add about the video work that we did.
Well, one of the things also that really would excite me about the work we did is that we would provide some vocabulary, especially around social emotional needs. We had a list of 10 social emotional needs, and these are so abstract for most of us, right? Until we can say, well, what does it look like when you are meeting your child's need to be safe and secure? What does that look like? So on the video, when we'd see a parent sitting on the floor with her child and maybe wrapping her arm around him and giving him a brief hug during play, we'd say, oh, that, you know, we would be able to comment on that and say, that is such a beautiful way to meet your child's need, to feel safe and secure. So then this idea that might otherwise be kind of abstract started to become real. And then they could start, you know, thinking about those needs. Oh, safe and secure, to feel worthy and loved, to feel heard, to feel understood. They could take those abstract ideas and begin to see how they were actually putting into action, doing some things that would meet those needs. And the video was incredibly instrumental in making that happen and helping them learn that vocabulary and having some thoughts about it.
I mean, we also, the videotaping, we also went into child cares. So in one way, we were reaching a bigger community, a teacher who would have influence on many children. We would pick one child that she was having challenges with and bring this vocabulary to her too, and have her be reflective about that child's needs. And then that would just have a ripple effect where she was thinking about other children's social emotional needs and feelings and bringing that language to her classroom, which was very empowering for her and shifted the way they dealt with feelings and dealt with children who were, you know, either internalizing or externalizing, to be empathetic to their needs instead of finding the right way to discipline or manage a child.
Well, so it sounds like the video is really a great way then to kind of create that perspective-taking kind of component and kind of be able to look at it from the outside and talk about experiences and create more of a vocabulary too.
And it really, too, developed, you know, we're talking about the self-empathy. I think for a parent to see herself maybe going through something challenging or a moment that's difficult with her child, and to really see themselves and start to have this self-reflection, and then to know that that's okay, or that this experience they had was happening to them, and that they could sort through all those feelings in our presence. Just really, I think when we're looking at that you had talked about that self-empathy being really kind of crucial, that video really helps with that.
Yeah, I can see so many kind of angles to this, how it can be, how we can kind of build a culture of empathy with kind of a process, you know, with processes like this. There's an organization here in Palo Alto where they bring parents together so that they can kind of they have like kind of like empathy buddies, you know. So I mean, you're coming in, and then so you have that community support, but then you've got other parents who you have an ongoing kind of a dialogue where you can go and kind of share, you know, problems you're having, kind of be heard about it. So
I think classes like that are way more powerful than just learning parenting skills, because it's really, once you try to apply those skills in your home, they could fall flat, and then you could get easily frustrated. And then if you were able to come back to a group of parents and talk about your frustrations and have people be empathetic to your situation, you're going to feel more empowered to go back and try again, instead of giving up, feeling hopeless or frustrated. So that's exactly how I like to do parenting classes now, is more on a reflective basis versus, here, let me tell you some techniques how to handle your child. It just doesn't work. Every child and every parent is different.
well, we were talking a little bit about the definitions, and one way of defining empathy is by using metaphor. You know, typically the metaphor of standing in someone else's shoes, looking through someone else's eyes, is actually the way people define empathy. And for me, empathy is like a cornucopia, in the sense that it kind of opens up this world to a rich experience, because I get to experience everyone else's feelings and you know, thoughts and insights and emotions. And so I'm wondering if each of you has your own unique definition, or not definition, but a metaphor of what empathy is like to you personally. You can't use the standing in the shoes one, because that's already taken.
I mean, we usually talk about entering the person's world. That would be a big one that we use when we're doing our work. You know, I tend to think of it as it can just be a moment of, it's like a little epiphany, like, oh my gosh, if that happened to me, how would I feel? What would it be like? You know, so I think it's entering the world's kind of the best thing I can use to describe my definition. But when I experience it, like someone's being empathetic towards me, it's not like I feel like, oh, they entered my world. You know, it's more of like, oh, I feel like they're getting it, or they are comforting me or being with me in a way that they're just there, not trying to fix it. It's just like, I'm going to join with you in your experience and trying to fix it for you. So for me, it's more like someone's going to just wrap their arms around me and just be there with me, rather than, let me see what we can do to fix that problem, you know? So it's more of this, it's more of just being held than let's go figure something out.
Well, and when I think of defining empathy, I struggle sometimes, because it is hard to define for me, it's hard to define like in cognitive terms, but it's something that when I experience it, I actually feel it like in my heart. And so I don't have a definition per se with words, but I have a definition with how it feels like in my heart when empathy is really strong, or the battery's really, really up there. Yeah. I can just feel it, you know, here. So.
And what does it feel like? What is that sensation?
Oh, it feels warm and tingly, and it feels it's beautiful, and it's and it's resonant. It's circular, because it's empathy is with another person. It's a social. It's not just in isolation. So even when you empathize, like when I empathize with trees, sometimes, you know, you just feel this pull and pulsating, and it is. It's something very beautiful, and we hope that everyone can experience it, and everyone can, even if they've had traumatic childhoods and experiences that have really shut that whole system down, or maybe their mirror neurons never, blipped open when they were infants because they were neglected or traumatized. But there is hope. It can regenerate in people. Yeah.
I think I too, if I get out of my kind of academic framework, I struggle to come up with a definition in my own words, but because I think that experience of empathy is so unique to each individual. So maybe there's as many definitions of empathy as there are people. Because if you ask someone, what would you need, to feel like someone was really stepping into your world and understanding what goes on in your mind and heart, what would that be like, and what would they do, and how would you know that that was happening for you? They would say something completely different than I might say. So I don't know. It's just I do have a sense of humility around this, because I think it is a practice. Being empathetic is a practice. It's not just a feeling. It's something that I find I have to think about at times. It's not always, spontaneous. I don't want to say spontaneous, but it's not just something I feel. It's something I do think about. And it's a practice in terms of wondering, I wonder what it would be like if that person really felt understood. Like, if I really could understand their world and their framework of the world, their beliefs. What do they believe fundamentally about themselves and the world that might help them show up in the way they do? That, to me, is a very deep layer of being empathetic. It's really getting into layers of beliefs and values and someone's structural framework for how they show up and act in the world. So, yeah, I think there's many, many definitions out there, particular to each person, maybe. And I say that because I think of empathy as being put into action as well. That there's some component there that's essential in empathy, that it be acted upon. Otherwise, it's not really living.
Another angle on this is, what is a metaphor for the opposite of empathy? For me, the opposite of empathy is like being out in the desert, like in the Sahara, where it's hot and dry, I'm lonely, there's nobody around, and very uncomfortable. So I wonder if you have kind of like a metaphor for the opposite of empathy.
That's a good one. Or how about like being stranded on a planet that's like, there's no water or food, and it's cold and you're disoriented, like a whole different planet. I mean, I think some people can feel that way, that we're all here on Earth, but some people feel like, they're not on the same planet as others, right? Because maybe they haven't had that experience of someone seeing where they live, so to speak. So as you described the desert, I saw like a whole another planet in the universe, maybe, that is desolate and isolated.
I think the opposite for me would be go stand in the corner. Like you're not allowed to feel, you're not allowed to socialize, you're just not allowed to be who you are. So it would be the opposite of like go stand in the corner and just kind of be invisible, and we're not going to take care of your needs or your feelings. Versus a kid or a person even just coming out and being whoever they are, and just having someone really trying to understand their world. So a teacher or a parent saying like, wow, what's making that kid tick? Or what's that person, why is that person acting like that? There must be something going on. To really someone's trying to figure you out or enter your world, versus I don't want to see you, I don't want to know your feelings, I don't want to meet your needs. So that's what came up for me when you asked that.
Yeah, when I hear you, I'm thinking of the timeout, the controversy. Timeouts that, many people use with their children, and that's something, there's all different theories, and, people can have their own beliefs around that or the way they use that. But that's one thing I think that with parents that when we've been working with them is to help them get into that, you're putting your child in the corner in this moment in time when they really need the empathy. And so I just think of timeouts when I think of that, because it's not a good experience to be blocked off from the person you need in your life, your parent or your caregiver. You need them to empathize with you. You do.
Yeah, I interviewed
as a parent. Whenever I don't empathize, it doesn't work. It backfires. Like a couple times, I'm like, okay, I think you need to time out because you're just out of control, and it doesn't work. He just gets more out of control until I say, like, whoa, okay, let's think about what's going on. If a kid or person doesn't feel acknowledged, usually their misbehavior gets bigger because they want to be heard. And so until you can really sit with the person to empathize with them, their behavior or the destructive behavior or whatever they're doing, addiction, whatever it is going to get bigger until someone says, oh, I get you. I really want to get you. Help me understand. So I think that timeouts or whatever punishment, it never works because the need just grows. It gets bigger until someone tries to meet that need. And I think the culture of empathy is going to be trying to understand, acknowledge, and meet people's needs for it to really work. But that's a big shift for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's like the timeout is kind of like using disconnection to solve the problem of disconnection, in a sense. Yeah. It's like let's solve the problem with more of it.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
Well, I just wondering, kind of coming here more towards the close, where's your work going, around empathy going in the future now? Where is your kind of direction that you're working on?
Well, we're all doing something different right now. So that might be an individual question. Yeah, we're not a collaborative now, which I hope we are in the future. How do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I still think a lot about it. I'm not working in the same field right now. However, I aspire to always bring it into the work that I do. I work very closely with the community, and I often have occasion to think about people's needs and to think about any breakdowns happening in the community that I see or in my own life. I go to that place as a resource for myself so that I can have self-empathy, but also empathy for others around me. So I think it's still just something that is present for me, and I see it as a resource, a way to help me cope with my own feelings and my own needs, and hopefully be responsive to others' feelings and needs as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think programs like the program that we all worked in, I think they are growing. And I think existing programs working with parents are shifting and changing because the need is changing. And there's this, I feel like, especially in the Seattle area, my experience has been there's kind of this opening to there's this need out there. And all these different programs that we have set up to kind of help are needing to shift a little bit. So these traditional parenting programs, they don't work anymore because what we're realizing is, like Kim said, it's not about having the skills all the time. It's about having this other way of being, empathizing, whatnot. So I think that no matter where we go, we're bringing it with us. And I think the need is continuing. And so it's beautiful to see that programs are beginning to shift and that the academic world is starting to write about it and bring it to the attention and use evidence-based practice and research to really kind of kind of open up a new way of working with families in the home and with their children. Yeah.
Okay, was that everyone?
Well, I'm a therapist, so I'm trying to be empathetic every day. That's the hat you put on when you enter your office. So I'm also doing some work with the Seattle Public Schools, which I think has been great, and bringing this program really to the schools. So that's been very rewarding. And in my practice, I've been challenging myself to work with couples more and having them be empathetic towards each other, and for each of them to say what their needs are and helping them figure out their needs and how do you meet the needs of your spouse or your partner, which has been kind of a new thing for me to work on that angle with it. With a lot of people who don't have children or who are struggling with parenting, but they're not on the same page because they're not listening to each other yet or understanding where each person is coming from. So that's been fun for me to bring empathy into a partnership, a couple. So.
Well, this is really great because as I was saying, that I see more and more the need for empathy, programs, ways to nurture empathy in the home. So how do we create a culture of empathy in the home and all the things that can support that, how society can support it. And so it seems like what you're really as pioneers on kind of doing that, creating approaches for doing that. And so I really want to continue kind of doing more interviews around this and maybe even create like a whole sub-conference for our online conference on how to nurture empathy in the home. So we have a whole series of these kind of, panels, as well as create more like a curriculum of things and programs and, resources for how to kind of maybe more systematically create the structure, around this. And, the real focus is the doing, but then there's also the structure that kind of, the organization that supports this, because you had to get organized, you had to, do scheduling, you had to, figure out where you were going and all that. So there's a whole structure and how, and, maybe training programs so that there's videos online that, it can facilitate some of this, maybe, for parents to kind of network with each other. I can see, Skype and whatever being an easy way for them to get together to kind of to share time with other parents. So, I'm really excited about this. So I'm really grateful that you, took the time to, get together and chat about it.
Well, we were very fortunate to work under Gene Kelly, whose program was promoting first relationships. And so, I think we came together at a unique time when this program was being developed and when we got to be part of it. And it really, affected us deeply because we want to continue the work wherever we go, in whatever capacity.
Thank you, Edwin.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just turned on my video so you can see me at the end here. I turned it off for bandwidth reasons. So, yeah, so thanks again. And I hope we can kind of keep in contact to, keep the ball rolling. I know you're kind of going in different directions now, but, maybe there'll be some overlap.
Yeah.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good luck with your other interviews and all your work. And at some point, it'll be, I'm curious to ask you what got you started in pursuing this question of empathy and wanting to create a culture of empathy. So that'll be another discussion.
Yeah, we'll start with it. We'll do that. That'll be, look forward to that. So you can give me empathy, right? It'll be like I'm wanting to start a series called Empathizing with Edwin, where, and I actually kind of did a couple of them, I just haven't put them online, is where like you're a therapist there where it's just people reflecting and empathizing with me, and then it would be kind of showing different styles of empathy, and I would be kind of like the person revealing everything, you know. So
that would be awesome. Yeah,
Got it. Wow.
okay, well,
I like it.
we'll set that up for the next time then. So okay, then I'll say goodbye then. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Give us an opportunity. Bye-bye.
See the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.